Hey guys, so my dad and I have been going through a number of the recipes in the Persona Cookbook for the past month or so, and we are beyond impressed. Like, each main character gets their own feature recipe, and it's clear from the gorgeous and heartfelt presentation that this entire project was made by fans for fans. I actually have a lot of fond memories cooking growing up, especially with and for my mom before she passed about 12 years ago now. So it was nice reconnecting with those things via these recipes. I'm also hoping to share some tips and or alternative ideas in this video, though if you just want my overall thoughts up front, these recipes definitely earn my seal of approval, however valuable that might be or not. The flavors are very authentic and nostalgic, and the directions are easy enough to follow for anyone, even beginners. I can genuinely recommend this book to anyone who's looking for a nice entry point to cooking common Japanese food. My thanks to Jarrett Melendez for his work on all of these recipes, and to Insight Editions for the early copy of this book. The official release date is October 7th, and it's up for pre-order right now if you wish. Now let's dig in! Okay, before we actually jump into the hot pot stuff, I just want to comment on how I find it was such a smart and considerate idea to include a dashi recipe. Like, I really can't understate that it's kind of the foundation of all Japanese broths. Now, your copy of the book may say it's on page 31. I know mine does. And that's probably a typo, so if you're still looking for it, I check page 7. The ingredients and instructions themselves are great, though if I can offer a slightly altered version, I hardly ever use katsuobushi, also called bonito flakes, myself. Like if I'm making dashi, I usually just boil kombu alone, though sometimes I'll use shiitake mushrooms if I have them on hand. Usually the dried kind, like what's pictured, very easy to find at most East Asian markets, and I boil it for a bit longer usually, like around 15 to 20 minutes if I include the mushrooms. But yeah, alright, on to Aki's hot pot recipe, a very simple yet satisfying thing to make. So, we are using this, which is like, I don't know what to exactly call it, a nabe pot, but it's kind of cheating because a lot of people won't have something like this. So just saying, if you have like a camping stove that you can like put on the table, something like this portable butane or propane stove. Don't get me wrong, it's perfectly acceptable and normal to cook it on the regular stovetop. But I also included some links to electric hot pots like the one we use down in the description if you want to invest in one. But okay, on to the couple other things that I prefer with my hot pot and or like altered about it. Firstly, I'm a sucker for miso flavored stuff, so I usually add miso paste to the broth. And for the same amount of liquid dashi and chicken stock in the recipe, I added about 2 tablespoons of miso paste. And speaking of chicken stock, just a little tip from me, but I always like to use this gluten-free Miner's chicken base. I just keep it in the fridge. Basically, you just mix it with water to make your own stock so you don't have to keep buying boxes of it or something like bouillon cubes. Though, heads up, I wouldn't recommend this if you don't use chicken stock very often because it does expire in about a year. Like, it's really convenient in my kitchen because of all the slow cooker recipes I have on rotation throughout the year, so just keep in mind that it might not make sense for you to get this. But back to my second suggestion for hot pot. While it's totally normal to cook rice separately and eat it alongside the hot pot, so you realize like, oh shoot, I forgot to start the rice or start the rice cooker. A nice substitute that I find and that I used to do, you can just keep frozen udon, plain frozen udon, that you can buy at any Asian store, and I think they're even at some potentially like regular grocery stores. You just have to add it in as the last thing to the hot pot since it cooks very quickly. Here's our hot pot. How is it, Dad?
It's wonderful. Ono.
Ono.
Oishii.
Oishii. Is it hisashiburi?
Sashiburi desu ne.
Yeah. Yeah, we used to eat this all the time with my mom. Speaking of memories, I fondly recall a number of times during high school that my closest group of 4 girlfriends, we'd all get together at, I'll call her T's house and have hot pot together some nights when her parents came home really late. We'd probably just throw on a movie or show in the background, but overall just had a blast spending time together. So yeah, I feel very lucky to understand what Akihiko was getting at in one of his dorm activities in Persona 3 Reload. Happy Switch 2 release soon, by the way. And now onto the next recipe, the ratatouille of Japan, and trust me, this reference will actually make sense in just a few minutes, but first I want to start off with this. So this pot is not that big, so we kind of have to make the recipe like twice to fit everything, but you'll be fine if you have a bigger cast iron pot than this. Meanwhile, this 1-quart pot is the only one we have. Still turned out delicious though! I'm actually glad I had an example to show you guys of cooking not always turning out perfectly, especially if some of you out there are feeling intimidated. But basically, just because you don't follow the recipe to a T doesn't mean you're gonna end up with a bad dish. Okay, actually, to be fair, baking does require precision due to the vital ratios of ingredients for proper chemical reactions in the oven. Shout out to Good Eats hosted by Alton Brown. But my point is that I find non-baking cooking tends to be generally more lenient with substitutions, omissions, and/or additions to recipes on the fly. Speaking of something we omitted, we forewent the sake in this recipe. Yes, it certainly adds flavor, but honestly, since we don't often drink nor cook with sake, we decided against buying a brand new bottle just for this. Our nikujaga still turned out absolute delish, and that's a testament to the recipe as a whole. Also, big thanks to my dad here. He's been gone for the past 2 years for work and actually just returned home this month, which is perfect timing for us to try out the Persona Cookbook. You see, since contracting transverse myelitis, I've mostly avoided stovetop cooking since I can't stand for a very long time and can't balance very well, making standing over an open flame kinda scary, not gonna lie. I've had a few close calls. Maybe someday I'll be able to invest in a more wheelchair/sitting accessible stove and oven. But as of right now, I'm very thankful my dad can help with the stuff I struggle with. But yeah, this is just a super nostalgic recipe for both of us. What we'd call natsukashii in Japanese. Nikujaga was, aside from oden, my mom's favorite savory dish, and it has this reputation as this kind of warm comfort food in Japan. The kind people often describe their mom or grandma cooking for the family. Niku means meat, and jaga is short for jagaimo or potatoes. Point being, it's this very homey dish made from very simple ingredients. So a kind of similar image to what ratatouille is in France. And I specifically bring that up because, LOL guys, we just like kind of turned on the TV and ratatouille is on tonight. The night that we're cooking the nikujaga. Speaking of homey comfort food, yakisoba was that for my dad. He made it a lot decades ago, back when he was kinda broke living in Japan. Except back then he would use the flavoring packets that came with the noodles. So when deciding between showing the Leblon curry or yakisoba for you guys, the reason I decided to share the latter has to do with making homemade yakisoba sauce. I just thought it'd be a nice, fun tip to share. Now, I don't remember exactly how I picked this up. I think I learned to eyeball it from my mom and my uncle A-chan back when we used to visit Japan every summer. Though for the sake of this video, I relied on an actual recipe, thanks to just one cookbook linked below, to get an idea of the actual proportions to share with you guys. Heads up, I'm used to putting much less Worcestershire sauce than this recipe calls for, since I find it can very easily overpower everything else. But okay, so the following makes about 3/4 cups of yakisoba sauce, which actually turned out to be the perfect amount for the 3 packets of yakisoba noodles included in this typical refrigerated noodle pack. So for the sauce, you'll want to start with a base of 3 tablespoons oyster sauce, then add 1.5 tablespoons shoyu/soy sauce, 1.5 tablespoons sugar, 2 tablespoons ketchup, and 4 tablespoons Worcestershire sauce instead of 7. So funny enough, I'm normally not one to eyeball things, even for recipes I've made plenty of times. But when I really think about it, most of those recipes are things I learned on my own after my mom got really sick. In other words, the only things I didn't precisely measure were things I learned from her. And since I'm on this topic, I'd like to say if you have any recipes within your family that you love, please make sure to learn it from your mom, dad, grandparents, aunts, whoever that might be. Because seriously, I can't encourage you enough to make and learn that particular dish you love from them before it's too late. Like, I'm glad there are a good amount of things I still remember how to make, but there are also plenty of things I never learned or practiced enough with my mom before she got too sick to do so. One example is her tamagoyaki, something that many of my friends ended up loving too. More on that story in just a bit. But anyway, it's not my intention to bring the mood down, but just wanting to share my experience and some of the things I wish I had done sooner, so hopefully you guys won't have to share some of these regrets. Hey guys, so I honestly wanted to share a little bit more of this story that is honestly one of the most touching things that ever happened to me in my life. So first of all, my mom used to make homemade lunch for me up to around the time I was like 12 years old, so that's around middle school age in the United States. And I used to share this food with my friends, and they loved her homemade lunches too. And sorry, so I have to give some additional context first. So growing up in elementary school, I shared the same class/cohort of kids from the 4th all the way to the 6th grades. So in other words, it's the same kids from year to year, and my mom used to cook and make things and bring this food for like various events throughout the year. Think of like Halloween. And like even my birthday, for example. So, you know, that's like really sweet of her, and also like, you know, nice of the school too. But yeah, so fast forward to my senior year of high school, the week that my mom passed away, a number of those same friends that I grew up with, they showed up at my house just after school. Like, I just heard from them earlier in the day that like if I was available, they would like to swing by. and they just really wanted to do something for me and also just for like in memory of my mom. Yeah, like the fact that like other kids even had those kinds of memories when like at this point in my life, my senior year of high school, like my mom had not been able to show up for like really anything for many years at that point, like 4 or 5, because she started getting like very sick after like middle schoolish. I just remember such like grateful tears hearing them talk about like, oh my god, I remember like when your mom used to be at the Japan booth, like every year we had in elementary school, there was a culture festival, and there's like all the different countries' booths, right? And like they remember that my mom was one of the moms or parents there, and she would help cook a lot of the food at that booth. Most of us kind of grew up in the same music program together as well. Since, you know, elementary school, we were very lucky as a school district to have a very good like fine arts and like music program in particular. I'll never like forget it. Like they sat down and like compose slash arrange this sheet music medley of just all of our instruments that would be playing. Like there's a cello and a couple trombones and clarinet and flute and violins. So like it was just this kind of almost like just chamber music. And we performed that together at my mom's memorial service. It was the week after Christmas. So yeah, like those people, like those friends, and just this goodness of humanity, you know, that it's something I feel very fortunate to have had. And I know that I am very lucky to have had that kind of support system in my life at one point, and very thankful for this like cookbook actually that kind of brought those memories back to the forefront again. So thanks for listening to this long thing.
Now onto dessert. Castella felt like it fit the channel, for one, because of its origins. So I've talked about these 16th century Portuguese missionaries and merchants a few times before, particularly in my Persona 4 videos. And these merchants introduced this type of sponge cake called bolo de Castella, or cake from Castile, and I apologize for my pronunciation. And this recipe over time was altered to better suit Japanese palates, such as adding this syrup called mizuame to make it more moist. Now, to this day, Castella is a very popular dessert in Japan and was one of my mom's favorites for sure. She used to get this Imuraya brand that's commonly found in the refrigerated section of most Japanese grocery stores, and both the regular and matcha flavored ones were part of my childhood. I've never baked a Castella myself before though, and I loved the nudging to finally do so via this cookbook. And it's also nice to finally have a use for this honey in the cupboard.
Hi guys, this is actually fresh local honey. It's so local that it's actually my neighbor across the street. He keeps honeybees and he's done that for over 10 years now, and he's always happy to share some. So yay, fresh honey.
So I ended up trying this out a couple times, and here are my biggest thoughts / suggestions. The first time, I undermixed the egg and sugar mixture by a long shot, and that's totally my bad since I didn't even do a full 10 minutes even though the recipe says 10 to 15. I was wrong. Whatever air it did develop was very soon deflated once I added the bread flour. And on that note, I highly recommend doing the final incorporation of dry and wet ingredients by hand, since even my lowest mixer setting seemed way too strong for this final step. So Ultimately, my first attempt did not rise like a sponge cake should and was very flat and dense texture-wise, though it still tasted delicious, which I think is a testament to this recipe in the book. Here's one of my next attempts where the texture actually came out like it should. I still definitely have room to improve though. Next time I'll try baking it a bit longer so the top part browns better. Like even though the toothpick came out clean, it still doesn't have that signature Castella look from the top, you know? Anyway, baking this Castella was a very nostalgic activity, even though this was my first time doing so. You see, much like the stovetop cooking difficulties I mentioned earlier, anything involving the oven is also hard for me and my physical balance issues. This is honestly one of the biggest loss of identity things for me after transverse myelitis, and that's because I could no longer bake independently when prior I used to love baking this zucchini bread in particular that I'd bring to school to share with my friends and classmates, which low-key became a fan favorite. But now I think I'd like to try doing more things like this with my dad again and just getting better at being okay with asking for help. Like, I still have this huge barrier, I feel sometimes, where I'm not, like, ableist to other people, but I can't help but want to be independent myself, you know? But now in tribute to my favorite character to analyze, the one who needed and deserved the Japanese sociocultural analysis the most and started it all on my channel. Hey guys, so this recipe is literally from the Bank of Dad. The one thing that Akechi did not have his entire childhood. RIP. But no, seriously. This is the smallest bottle I could find of this kind of syrup. And, let's just say it's not exactly, like, inexpensive. And not only that, like, my dad and I, like, we don't really drink. So I guess we're gonna be having this one mocktail for the rest of the year, I guess, to use this up.
How much did you make?
I don't even really know. I just know you're supposed to top it with club soda so don't fill the whole thing. I don't know how right this is, but it looks cool. Okay, cheers! Kanpai!
Oh, it's good.
Oh, dude, guys. Yeah, dude, guys, this is actually really good. My dad was in, oh, see, he has a Honolulu triathlon shirt on right now. My dad was in Hawaii for a good amount of this year, so that's why I thought the blue Hawaiian is kind of fitting too. How is it, Dad? Does it taste
really
like
good.
Hawaii?
Yeah.
So yeah, overall, I love this cookbook and think it's definitely worth getting if you love cooking and or are a fan of Persona who is looking to finally get into it. We all know that our stats all start from somewhere, and cooking is such a great skill to learn since it gives you so much more input and agency over what you eat, such as adjusting for dietary needs and or restrictions as needed. There's actually a very considerate dietary chart of all the recipes in the back of this cookbook. Thanks again to Insight Editions for this early look. And finally, I'd like to thank all my patrons and channel members for their support. These videos would not be possible without you, and I'd especially like to thank my special Fusion supporters, Big Clingy, Sam Bezjak, M. Meownalin, Malcolm Lowry, Peter Shepard, Andrea Palace, Jimmy Tapiz, Frank Sasaki, Phoenix Black, Weeping Blade, and Meek Massacre.